We've got about 10 minutes left for questions. If anybody in the audience has a question, please come up to the microphone in the middle, and you can ask it from there. Is there anybody in the audience with a question? If not, I'll start us off. Okay. Yeah, why don't you try to come to the microphone so people can hear you who are on the webcast as well. Thank you. And just introduce yourself very quickly.
James Sturman, the University of Kansas and Lancaster University. Question for John, I guess, as well as Alberto at CAIDA. Have you correlated, sort of looked at how well what you're doing correlates to, say, Renesas looking at AS prefixes going down, that sort of thing, which they do a lot?
Yeah, that's actually, I have data for that in the tech report that I referenced in my talk, and we see reasonable correspondence, but the Renesas method is based on routing analysis, BGP tables, and mine is based on edge networks, so we do see some differences due to that.
Yeah, same thing.
Go ahead, sorry.
It's exactly as John said. Reasonable matching a different kind of data.
Henning, go ahead.
Henning Schultzwini. I have a related question. One of the things that we obviously observed is that we have two sources of communication outages, particularly in residential businesses, namely loss of power. So even if a network was up, there wasn't much you could do after, since there's often very limited backup power, obviously, on premises. And secondly, a loss of connectivity, various disruptions in that. I wonder if you have, either of you have, or any of you, for that matter, have thought about ways to differentiate those, because what tends to happen, if nothing else, is that we hear a lot from the power guys say, well, it was really the communication lines, even after we bought the power backup, the communication systems were still down, and vice versa, obviously, as well. There wasn't really any great point of bringing back, say, the cable TV infrastructure if there was no cable modem that could reasonably work, since, as I said, very few have power backup. So this is for you, for two of you, but any others who want to speculate on that as well.
Yeah, we thought about it. In the case, for example, we analyzed the earthquake that struck Christchurch in New Zealand at the beginning of 2011. We got some data from the electric company. This is one of the challenges, and we need data. We need to talk to people from other fields and start to combine our measurements. So probably measurement activity in the smart grid field could help. Yeah, definitely. It's difficult to understand, as you said. It's very difficult to understand what's then the real cause of the outage. It's also that people may be far from the PC or just shut them down, and this could change completely the results of our measurements. So there are multiple causes that are somehow correlated.
So I think that's a really good question, Henning. I think in our work, at least, to start with, we try explicitly not to differentiate those. We're trying to do an end-to-end test. I just want to know what's the overall level of outage or not. But it's a really fascinating question. What would it take to pull that apart? So I just came from NANOG, the Network Operators Group, which is meeting right now in Florida, much warmer. The general reports there, and there were discussions there about Sandy as well, the general reports were that the routing infrastructure was quite robust to Sandy. So they saw a lot of higher latency, perhaps, but not loss of connectivity in general. So I think the best answer I could give is, in general, my intuition is the core network infrastructure was quite resilient, and the edge accounts for the losses that appear in our data.
The other key thing, one thing that we did in both Chile and Japan, and I had one plot showing power outages and communication outages. When you look into the statistic analysis of power outages and communication outages, the ones that relate with power, you typically have a delay because of the energy storage that you have within the communication network. So it's not immediately after. So you see a direct correlation on those power outages, and it's the temporal delay and it's about a day, little bit more, depending on how much storage you have built in on your communication network, how those outages due to power outages. So, yeah.
Let me add one thing. Actually, there are some inferences that can be made by looking at networking measurement data about instead the behavior of the power system, like caches that get reloaded, for example, when the system starts up back again. But definitely the best thing would be to talk to each other. That's why workshops like this one are good for this purpose. Because at NANOG, for example, or networking conferences, we just talk to other networking guys instead of talking to people that work with smart grids or.
So do you know if any of you, I mean, you've used kind of a passive, more or less, in a sense, use active measurements, but in the sense that there was no participation by any of the network providers, in the sense of the website operators or the hosting companies or anybody in there. It would seem like that somebody like Google or Facebook would see, if they just look at their web server log, that suddenly large parts of New Jersey are no longer accessing Google search, and that would be fairly visible very quickly. And since you have very long-term statistics, do you know if anybody else has looked at that?
So
metric?
yes, exactly. So there was a presentation at NANOG, so I was on this panel, and I gave a version of what I shared with you. A gentleman from Akamai, Patrick Gilmore, presented Akamai data and showed decreases in Akamai server load in the several days following Sandy. So exactly the question you're asking. And, you know, we would love to be able to cross-index our data with theirs.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Kanzi from NYU Poly. I have a question for John. You just mentioned that during the Storm Sandy, the observation showed that the backbone network is pretty robust in terms of connectivity. But do you have any observations in terms of capacity and load balance and congestion? And I guess most important objective of this measurement is to see how to further improve the design, both existing and the future designs. And what can we do to leverage some new proposals like SDN? So does that help? Thank you.
Wow. So a quick answer. So we have not done any analysis trying to evaluate capacity. We're just focused on connectivity right now. I actually think we could tease out some numbers from our data, but that's a whole other effort. I have seen data from Renesas and I think your colleague Alberto from RIPE has okay. Data looking at capacity and looking at latency at least, and you can think about latency as reflecting some level of capacity.
Well, we showed something about latency.
Yeah, and you had data in your slides.
Yeah.
So there is some data about capacity, but I don't know.
Yeah. I'll just add one thing to that. I mean, I think a lot of the transit providers significantly over-provision their networks, so they might be running at, say, 30% or less link utilization, so it could probably tolerate a big shift in where traffic is entering or leaving the network. I would say one counterexample to that I heard about was when the Middle East fiber cut happened a few years ago. A lot of ISPs in the US had traffic enter their network in the other side of the country. Stuff that would have come in on the East Coast was now coming in on the West Coast or vice versa. Traffic was going the other way around the world. And in that case, the traffic load was substantially different than what was provisioned for. So.
All right, I think, well, we're at, if it calls for about a 30-second answer, I'll let you do it. Otherwise, we got to wrap it up.
Okay, this is Joe Marks, AT&T. I was wondering from the regulatory and policy perspective, some of the studies that you, at least Alexis and you presented, call for a little bit of flexibility versus rigid regulation. And I was wondering if you could give a 30-second perspective of that. For example, you know, the technology with the batteries improving significantly over time. Just wondering what you thought about that.
I think that there is need to be a more flexible approach to power policy. I think that's one of the main barriers towards development of most of these technologies is policies. So, you know, full ahead with flexibility.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I would just add, you know, just sometimes there is no policy. Some of this new technology is new, and at the different levels, the civil level, municipal level, people don't know what to do. You want to put in a charger or something, that's becoming well known, but actually educating and informing people what to do if you're going to want to put in a battery, or, you know, that's an important component too.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll wrap up. I want to thank the panelists very much for all of their work and their contribution. I'd also like to thank the Brooklyn, the law school, and also the FCC staff for all of their preparation and work. Thank you very much to all of you.